So as most people are probably aware by now, the Golden State Warriors traded for Chris Paul at the start of the offseason in return for Jordan Poole. And ever since that move happened, a lot of NBA fans have been trying to figure out how exactly that move would work. Because at that point, we didn't really have a lot of information about how the Warriors would utilize him. But now it's become pretty clear what they want to do. And that is they want to start Chris Paul whenever possible. Now, I'm just gonna come out and say this. I have no idea what this is. I have no idea who came up with this. I have no idea how that decision even made it this far to the point where it's actually being legitimately considered. Now, the thing to keep in mind, especially for the preseason games in the first couple weeks of the season, is that Draymond Green is now out with an ankle sprain. And so moving Chris Paul into the starting lineup makes a little bit more sense when you consider the fact that he's going to be out until possibly the first week or two of the regular season. But then after that, when Draymond Green is actually back, it starts to make less and less sense, because when you consider the starting lineup of the Golden State Warriors, especially the one from last season, where again every player is going to be back by maybe late October, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Kevon Looney, even though they played limited minutes last season, or at least not as many minutes as you would have hoped, they were still one of, if not the best 5-man lineups in the entire league. And so to break that up for Chris Paul, that's the part that doesn't really make much sense to me. Now, obviously, it's clear that they're trying to take some inspiration from the lineup that they ran in the playoffs a couple seasons ago, the one with Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Jordan Poole at the 5 and moving Kevon Looney to the bench. The thing about that, and the thing to keep in mind, is the fact that Jordan Poole at that point was a microwave scorer who was going to take advantage of the mismatches that he was about to be given by the Denver Nuggets just having an insane lack of guard depth in that first round series. His toughest matchup was probably Monte Morris, but then after that it got really thin. It was a collection of Will Barton, Austin Rivers, Bryn Forbes, and Facu Campazzo. Like, it was a situation where he was just destined to go off no matter what, because that's literally just, they had no one to put on him. And so he absolutely cooked in that lineup, but it is also important to keep in mind that they didn't start that lineup a lot that playoffs. They only did it a handful of times, and that's because as the playoffs ran on, they needed to run old reliable, I guess we'll call it, with Kevon Looney at the 5. So even with the Golden State Warriors having that insane lineup that, you know, we were anticipating that entire season, they didn't really even run it that much. Now, they would run it in specific circumstances throughout the game, but my point still stands, they didn't really run it as much as we thought they were going to. Fast forward to the next season, and that lineup got even worse because of the inconsistency of Jordan Poole's scoring, and also throughout the last regular season, not having a bunch of people in the lineup. Well, not a bunch of people, but 2 main people in that lineup, Steph Curry and Andrew Wiggins. That obviously takes a toll as well. And that was a lineup that was primarily focused on offense while also being able to hold their own on defense. Now, obviously Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins are going to be your main defensive pieces in that lineup, and they definitely held up. As you start to go down the list, it kind of gets a little bit thin. Klay Thompson is obviously not the defender that he used to be, but he was still pretty good. Steph Curry is an improved defender in the last few seasons, but obviously not the defender that Andrew Wiggins or Draymond Green are, but he still can hold his own. Jordan Poole on defense, I don't even know if those 2 words go together, but he's there mainly for offensive purposes, and so that's fine. So that's the thing with that lineup. The thing that they're going for with this lineup does not make sense at all, because Chris Paul does not really benefit them offensively or defensively in a way that would justify them running that lineup over having Kevon Looney at the 5. Chris Paul at this point is probably going to be hunted on defense a lot. There's still the chance that he could be a pretty decent post defender, you know, things like that. On ball defense, I'm not sure at this point, but that's probably all that he would really provide at this point, other than, you know, playing passing lanes and things like that. And so that's the defensive side of things. And then the offensive side of things, it makes even less sense when you consider the fact that Chris Paul is, like, he's known throughout his career for his ability to control the pace of a game and slow the game down. That is not what this lineup needs to be doing. And that's not really the preferred style of the Warriors. Now, don't get me wrong, down the stretch of a close game, that could be very useful, controlling the pace of the game, because that's where a lot of the games last season were lost. But then again, keep in mind that Jordan Poole was in a lot of those closing lineups. And so a big key factor might be just not having Jordan Poole rather than having Chris Paul on the floor. It is interesting to think about the 3-guard lineup situation with Draymond Green at center. Now, it is important to note that some of the Warriors' best lineups in the last decade have been Draymond Green at center lineups. But we've heard talks this entire summer about them starting Chris Paul, and that would mean that Kevon Looney would be moved to the bench. I don't think that that's really up for debate. Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, Klay Thompson are not moving to the bench. Steph Curry is obviously not moving to the bench, and so Kevon Looney would be that player. They are not running Draymond Green at the center position for an entire season, or at least I would hope that they would not do that. As I said before, they barely even ran him at center that much in 2022 with the lineup that I was just talking about. And so when you're barely running him for 16 to 20 games, they're not gonna do this for 75 plus. And so everything about this just doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, all of this is speculatory, although everybody that we've seen so far has been very open to the idea of Chris Paul starting. Now, they haven't made any definitive answers yet, just that it's something that you definitely could and probably will see at several points throughout the season. Again, Draymond Green is about to be out, so this definitely makes more sense in preseason and the first week of the season to kind of experiment. But anything beyond that, it really doesn't make that much sense at all. And even at that, I don't think that that's something that they should even be doing as it is, even with Draymond Green out, because I feel like the whole point that we would even get Chris Paul in the first place is to have a better facilitator to run the second unit. And if Chris Paul is going to be starting, then obviously, you can stagger his minutes with the bench. But even with him being in the starting lineup, I don't see how that would be the preferred method. It just doesn't make sense to me to have him do that rather than just bringing him off the bench with the second unit. Bench players are just by default going to be playing at a slower pace than the starters. And Chris Paul offenses have been sort of on a decline throughout the last few seasons of his career. He's old. He's 38, turning 39 years old this season, which is something that I have been very clear on in my last couple videos about this whole situation. The Phoenix Suns last season scored 115.4 points with Chris Paul on the floor, which is 59th percentile, according to Cleaning the Glass, and by all other metrics, him being on the court would only add 2 wins to their expected win total. That 115.4 is a downgrade from the previous season, which was 117.1, which was 86th percentile, and then the previous season before that, it was 82nd percentile. Before that, the one season in OKC, he was 99th percentile in points added per 100 possessions at over 13, a number that we hadn't seen from him since his Clippers days. But even though he did have that great year, he is now 4 years older, and I mean, the numbers do not lie. He has been on a steady decline ever since then, and he's almost 40, so it makes sense. So it doesn't really make that much sense to me to have someone like Chris Paul running with one of the best starting fives in the entire league, or at least that's what it would be without him in the lineup, because obviously one of them would have to be moved to the bench. Obviously that would probably be Kevon Looney. And so none of this makes any sense. Obviously we haven't even seen them play yet. I could be overreacting, but I think it is important to kind of see what they do in preseason, and also keep in mind the fact that Draymond Green is not going to be there. That's going to be a huge thing moving forward, because their defense with Chris Paul in the lineup is going to be even worse than it would have been already, and that is not ideal. Oh yeah, and by the way, adding on to that, talks of Klay Thompson defending power forwards this season. So in a season where you have Draymond Green, well, not right now, but where you have Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins in the lineup, Klay Thompson is going to be guarding the 4. Or at least he's going to be more comfortable guarding the 4. With all due respect, no. No. Now, I could be overreacting, but the Warriors have also been very persistent about this idea throughout the entire offseason, so we will need to wait and see. But that's about it for me. I know that this was sort of a ramble, but I feel like I just needed to kind of get my thoughts on record before I went insane. So I appreciate you listening to me. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell to be notified when I upload. Comment down below what you want to see next. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.